being here. John, if you don't mind calling the roll, please.
Sure. Mike Leibowitz,
Here.
Mahalia Fernando. Don't see her yet. Cole Stout. Jose Del Cid.
Here. And Cole's here too.
Cole's here too. All right. Lucas Havaski said he wouldn't be here tonight. Brian Meyer.
Here.
Tina Passman.
Here.
Pat Sheehan. Not yet. Lavelle Walls.
Here.
Emma Wormser.
Here.
All right. You, sir, have a quorum.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you again, everybody. We had a really productive RAC meeting last month, and as I kind of put in an email to all of you, some members of the board were really impressed with our work and what we're trying to do and attempting to do. I think we had 2 recommendations to the board this past meeting, as well as some of our budget things that we'll talk about again today. So, and they really praised our leadership, saying, like I said earlier in the email, is that what we're doing now is what they've been waiting for years for the RAC to become. So, that's I think we can build on that and keep going. John, is there anybody that you're aware of from the public that would like to speak to the RAC?
I do not see anybody on aside from members and staff right now. So.
Okay, so seeing and having no members of the public here today, we'll move on to our first item on the agenda, and it's Metro Cybersecurity. Mr. Wah, he's the Senior Director of Cybersecurity for Metro. Sir, thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to us. The genesis of the, I guess, our questions and requests to speak to you to kind of learn more about cybersecurity and vulnerabilities is through part of the RAC's outreach. People, particularly federal employees and military personnel, had some concerns about their data based on some of the public reporting regarding OIG reports. And that's kind of, and I know I've had quite a few conversations with people about that. So we really appreciate you taking the time to present to us. And floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Give me a second. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, and let me share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Let me. All right. So as mentioned, my name is Joel Watt. I'm the Senior Director of Cybersecurity and the Chief Information Security Officer. And thank you all for offering to give me some time to speak tonight. I really enjoy these opportunities to reach out to people that may not normally interact a lot with cybersecurity. Some of you may know, some of you may not. This month is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And the theme of this month, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, is how can we all protect ourselves online, which is somewhat in line with the presentation tonight, is how is WMATA protecting us online as writers. I only have a few minutes, so we're going to be very high level. But the topics that I'm going to cover tonight is one, and I like to start with this when discussing cybersecurity, is that no company can ever be 100% cyber secure. I want to touch on that. My Metro has not had a cyber breach in the past 5 years. I state 5 years because that's how long I've been here. It's been much longer than that, but I would have to go back into the archives to figure out if we've ever had a reportable cyber breach in our history. We have implemented robust cyber defenses, and we continually strive to improve those defenses. So as stated, nothing is ever 100% effective. Nothing is ever 100% cyber secure. The analogy I like to use is that of a bank vault. Bank vaults are not rated in terms of penetrable and impenetrable. They're rated by the amount of time that it would take a team of thieves to break into that vault using normal tools. And cybersecurity is very similar. Our program is structured around the National Institute of Standards and Technology's cybersecurity framework. And what that framework is meant to do, and that's over there on the right-hand side, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The further we can shift to the left of that, the better we are at identifying all of our assets, hardware, software, our users, our data. The better we are at protecting that, the better we will be at detecting that, the more likely we will be at identifying any sort of anomalous activity before it becomes an incident or a breach. But it's also important to note that risks change constantly. Malware and vulnerabilities are adapting. They are getting smarter every day. And since most of our users are human, we cannot ever eliminate human error. So before we continue with this slide, it is important to note that there have been 2 articles, I think, that probably have piqued the interest of this committee and others in the community. One was in the Washington Post first, and that was in response to our Office of the Inspector General, a report on findings of cybersecurity, and another was on a breach of a partner of ours, Transerve. We are partners with the OIG. We work with them. We feed them data. Majority of the data in their report they got from us, not from external sources. And we've confirmed with external partners, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, that there was never a breach of WMATA. WMATA data was never breached. It was a contractor. It was a lapse in processes, but it was not a breach. The Transerve breach was a third-party partner. It was unfortunate, but that partner took appropriate actions at the time. And we took also appropriate actions as soon as we were notified of that to ensure that that breach had not propagated into our WMATA system. So none of the data that we hold was ever breached. Some examples of what we do in terms of ensuring the cybersecurity. We have what's called endpoint detection and response. Some vendors call it enhanced detection and response. That has replaced what you would know as traditional antivirus. It's more modern. Not only can it detect signatures of known viruses, but it can detect behavior patterns that indicate an unknown virus. We also, in addition to that, we have what's called extended detection response, XDR. That is an additional service that we get from our EDR provider that gives us 24/7 coverage where they can automate response activities for any anomalous threats or activities they see and escalate to us during normal working hours when they see them. The human element, again, is very important. Humans do make mistakes, so we have robust cybersecurity awareness training for all of our users on an annual basis, and we do continuous phishing exercises. Phishing is the email type of attack where you try and get a user to click on a link or provide you information. It's one of the most common vectors for penetration of any enterprise. So we do continuous phishing exercises to ensure that we are maintaining an appropriate level of resilience against that mechanism of attack. And we partner extensively with our federal agencies, and 2 examples are listed here. We have the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency. By TSA Security Directive, we're required to partner with them for our incident response program. They have evaluated us, and they have evaluated that we meet all the federal requirements, and we continue to work with them to improve it. Even though we've met the requirements, we want to be better than the requirements. We're bringing them in this year to do some extended incident response testing, multi-level incident response testing, one level for the system administrators and another level for executives and senior managers, because each one of those levels have a different response in terms of an incident that may impact WMATA, but each one is appropriate to test. We also recently brought in the Transportation Security Administration, the Surface Operations Cybersecurity Team, and we brought them in specifically to validate the cybersecurity of our cyber critical systems. And what I mean by cyber critical systems are those systems that run our rail operations. The principal cybersecurity protection of those systems is segmentation from the corporate network. And so we brought them in, and they validated that principal cybersecurity is in place for those systems. In cybersecurity, we have a saying that good enough is never good enough. Again, as I mentioned, the threats are always evolving. The adversaries are always getting better. So we are always looking for areas where we can improve. And the OIG report called out a couple of those areas for us, and we're working diligently to improve. Vulnerability and patch management. For those of you that are in the know, Microsoft and other operating systems vendors, they put out routine security patches, and the speed with which an organization could get those patches applied does have an impact on cybersecurity and cyber resilience. And we are working diligently to ensure that we are meeting responsible guidelines for implementing those patches. We are improving and modernizing our access controls. As WMATA is looking to modernize digitally to use more of our data in more advanced ways to get better in terms of communicating with our passengers and how we are effective at operating rail and bus, and how we are effective and cost effective at maintaining all of the equipment that we need. That requires more and more people to have access to more and more data. What that is driving us in terms of cybersecurity is to ensure that we have very modern access controls. We know where our data is. We know who the people who should be accessing it are, and we're enforcing those access controls in a modern way. Another aspect of modern cybersecurity is digital asset management in terms of hardware and software that's running on our network and data. Understanding where all of those digital assets are and ensuring that we have visibility in combination with the access controls. Another important element is real-time network visibility of all traffic that's flying across the network. That's where operations and cyber defenders really get most of their information, is in the ones and zeros that are flying across the wire. And we are working at improving that real-time network visibility, taking all the four things above and piping them into that fifth thing, integrating them into a more modern, what we call a cyber fusion center, security operations center, ensuring that we have the right tools, the right metrics measurement, the right people looking at information so we can identify anomalous activity and respond to it to ensure that Metro is safe. I understand that's a lot. I apologize for speaking quickly. It was a lot to cover in 5 minutes. I was trying to be as informational as I could with the time I had. So I welcome any questions. I see Emma has her hand up.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just had a question. I assume you guys sort of plan for an incident, and I'm wondering what your communication path looks like in the event of an incident to notify customers that their information may have been breached.
So we would follow the federal law. So of course there are a bunch of procedures that would take place internally to identify exactly what happened, exactly what information was breached, what users, employees or customers may potentially be impacted. And then we would follow federal law as far as notifying employees or notifying anyone who's impacted, the public or whatever. And the point of that is to make sure that people don't have to guess if they're impacted by a breach. They would know for certain because they would be notified. Level walls.
Let me take it off. Thank you, Mr. Wall, for the presentation. But from what you're saying, you all work with the OIG as far as I guess taking care of any recommendations that they would end up having based on their work. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, because the way that it was reported in the media, it was almost like they were like your group was ignoring the recommendations, and I didn't know whether it was something that wasn't going to be able to be cost effective based off of the returns that you would end up getting. So that is correct.
That is correct. I will share with this group something that I've shared with the senior executive team, the GM, the board. A lot of what is in that report and I mean this sincerely, came from either myself or my team. And so I truly and sincerely agree with that report. I just wish it had come a year or two earlier. As I mentioned, I've been here since January of 2019. And in the first couple of years that I'd been here, to be honest with this group, I wish that we had been able to make more progress in terms of cybersecurity. And I expressed that to the OIG, and that ended up in that report. At the time the report was published, though, WMATA leadership had changed drastically. We had a new GM. We had a lot of new members on the SET. We had a new chief information officer. So things had really turned around by the time that report was published. And I think that's important to note, that a lot of the things that we needed to move faster, they are already moving in the right direction with the momentum that I'm comfortable with at the present time.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Mhm.
It
Okay.
does.
Mm.
Thank you.
Looks like we have Jose next.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I'll be very brief because I'm not an expert at this, but I do appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us. It's something that the RAC had brought up several times, and having the opportunity to come talk to us is very helpful in kind of explaining that OIG report. But as WMATA is looking at improving cybersecurity, or luckily we haven't had any real major threats. Other transit agencies are also dealing with this stuff. Are there any things that you're learning from your partners and other transit systems or authorities that maybe that we need to bring or to WMATA that you can talk about today?
So that is an excellent question. We do a lot of partner outreach to our peers. In terms of where we are in our cyber program, and I don't want to come off as arrogant, I think we are ahead of most of the country. The only people I would put maybe ahead of us is MTA in New York. They have a staff that's about twice as large as mine and a larger budget, and they're a little further ahead of where I want to be in terms of real-time visibility of everything, all the data that's flying across the wire and on the corporate network and on the segmented operational technology network that runs the rail and bus systems. But yes, to answer your question directly, yes, we are talking constantly in terms of CISOs across these different organizations. There's a cybersecurity transit consortium that meets at least once a month. MTA leads that. I'm a part of it. They're having a meeting up in New York this month. And so we're constantly exchanging information. Things that we've done, I've sent out to several partners and they've implemented in their organizations. Things that we've done here in terms of a cybersecurity amendment for the 8000 series rail cars, for example. We've sent out to Toronto, we sent out to Denver, we sent out to a couple other places, and they've utilized our work. But if I ever see anything that somebody's doing better than me, I will absolutely plagiarize as much as possible, because you can only get better when you do that, right?
And thank you. That's helpful, especially as WMATA is looking at using technology more. There's with that there are more risks, and some of our those partner agencies are looking at this stuff or implementing it as well. So there could be some lessons learned and lessons earned from that. So thank you again for that answer.
Certainly.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. I have a few questions for you as well, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
And it's always good to talk to a former chief warrant officer. I was a 25 Charlie, which means a long time ago, which means I carried a radio around. So, you had much more with that. But anyway, just a couple of questions. And again, thank you. And I know we've mentioned the genesis of why we're asking you these questions.
Yes.
One of them is, are you involved in the 8000 series train procurement in terms of the cybersecurity? Because I know, like, for example, the new trains are going to have USB ports, I think, and things like that. Just wondering where you are in that process and as it goes on.
I am intimately involved with that process. When I got here in 2019, I had a 90-day plan of what I wanted to do, and that got thrown out the window because the first thing I had to do was get involved with the 8000 series and write that cybersecurity amendment for it. And I've been involved ever since. Most recently, we had was it Hitachi and some of their sub vendors out at the Greenbelt facility for a cybersecurity kind of standard setting meeting as we drive forward through the design build phases. So I am very intimately involved in that project and very acutely aware of a lot of the issues. We're looking at USB ports. Some of those things don't make sense, and so they may not be part of the final rail car design. But there's a lot of technology that does, that provides meaningful information to passengers that people need, that are passengers need to have safe and effective commutes through the city. So we're trying to figure out exactly how to get all that done in a secure way.
Great, thank you.
We're pushing them in ways. Sorry to take. I don't want to take this too far off topic, but it's interesting that you mentioned that, because the builder community is learning as we are, and we're one of the first that had a cybersecurity amendment. And so we're kind of driving the community down this path of what does cybersecurity mean for a piece of rolling stock, right? It's no longer just wheels and engines, it's a computer that drives all those wheels and engines. So it's a very interesting discussions. I'm excited to be a part of it.
Right, that sounds interesting. Not just the USB stuff, but also probably
Yeah.
getting the other systems to talk to each other and on all the technical parts that you don't need to get into tonight.
Yep.
So I'll get back to the OIG reporting, because again, that was kind of where the genesis of our
Yes.
conversation came from. Although definitely everything you've, on behalf of the RAC, appreciate everything you said, what you can't say. I mean, we understand all that, and it's just been really excellent for us all and really informative. So the OIG reporting, I know you've acknowledged this too, that your team has been behind in addressing certain recommendations, and I just want to make sure, is part of it I guess the delay for things like, I know, like back from 2019 there was a few recommendations that weren't there yet. Is that just because a lot of, is that main thing like just the turnover and a lot of the things going on that you touched on? Is there a bigger issue that still needs to be resolved or institutional to kind of, I guess the big question that some of the writers have conveyed is, what's the holdup? Why is this taking so long to fix these?
So in our response to the OIG's memorandum, and I don't dispute anything they write, they rightly called out, and I'm calling from memory, they call out that we had a certain number of findings that had been open since 2019. I can't remember the exact number. In my response, I call out that we had hundreds that we had closed in that interim, and that's not meant to justify the ones that are open, but we have been working constantly since 2019 to close all the findings that we can with the resources and the time that we have.
So you've triaged it, right?
We triaged it. We were trying to pick the low hanging fruit up to the more difficult, more complex tasks. One thing that I will reiterate to this group, a confidence that I have now, and don't want to bash anyone that existed here before, but the leadership we have now, everybody from the GM, Randy is awesome. His vision is fantastic. My new boss, Judd Nicholson, the chief digital officer, is fantastic. He understands cybersecurity and its role in supporting the organization. I feel we are in an exceptionally healthy place now to tackle the very complex issues that remain from those 2019 findings.
So has this, I guess the leadership and kind of the new direction, the better seeming direction going, again, not disparaging anything else,
Yep.
is that solved completely, or is it giving you cover to kind of eliminate the siloing issue that seems like it was a issue in the past? Where I think was it cybersecurity, and then the more infrastructure part weren't really talking to each other as much, or is that just?
So the siloing issue is not an issue anymore. Again, Judd has great leadership. I have a tremendous communication with my peers across what we call digital modernization. And I have all the support I need without escalating things to executive level to get action that I need for patching, for the right level of resources to fix issues, whatever. It is a new day, and I do have tools that I didn't have before in terms of the cooperation.
Great, thank you. And just one last question for you, and you touched on it, based on that Washington Post article and kind of the other articles that kind of spawned from that. And I understand, the characterization might have gotten a little askew. And I think Randy had actually pushed back a little bit on that. But
Yeah.
I guess the overall question is there was have you conducted or is this even relevant to this kind of an audit of everybody, contractors and staff that has access to the network to make sure that people who've kind of like who are gone or and I know it's hard to do with contractors sometimes, but like they've been read off or whatever the process is, that so only the people that have access or should have access have it, and people you know what I'm saying.
So another really excellent question. I've been doing cybersecurity for a long time. I was at the federal government for a while, at the FBI, and then here at WMATA. I can assure you that contractors have always been the anomaly in terms of cybersecurity, ensuring that we have adequate count of contractors where they are, when they're working, when they're on a contract, when they're not on a contract. What that January event did is it did really spur us to do a deep dive into our processes and figure out where we need to be better. And we've implemented a lot of changes since then. We have some very restrictive VPN policies now. We're trying to follow the WMATA charter for where people can access. The WMATA charter says Maryland, DC, Virginia, West Virginia, what is it, Pennsylvania, and I think Delaware for some reason. But that's so wherever the WMATA charter says people can access from, that's where we're going to have standard VPN access from. Other than that, they're going to have to request an exception, contractor, employee. I don't care. Everybody will be known, they will be accepted, and their accesses will be controlled. Same thing for O365, whatever data they're accessing. So there were policies previously to that January incident that, quite honestly, were a little too lax. After that January incident, we took a good hard look internally and realized where we needed to tighten up. We made some policy changes. Randy approved those, and now we're implementing those technical mechanisms to implement those policy changes. So every event, it's never dismissed. It's always a learning event. There always is something to take from every one of those incidents. Even though the headline was a little bit of a clickbait tagline, there was still a lot of lessons learned to take from that January incident.
Great,
And we're implementing those.
appreciate it. And I'll tell you, this has been great. This has been really informative. And I think riders will feel a little better as we convey it back to them. I'm going to open it up one last time in case anybody else has any questions or follow up. If you want to raise your hand on there. We have Lavelle has a follow up, or does
Yeah,
he not?
Mr. Water, with going back to the recommendations again, are there some of the recommendations that were made, or how many of them are the open recommendations? How many of those are still relevant now and could be resolved, and versus how many are would not be applicable currently based off of the current policy?
So that's an interesting question. I don't have specific data or a slide to show you.
Okay.
I consider all of those findings applicable. In some cases, the original management response, the original technology we proposed back in 2019 is no longer relevant. And so we're looking at new solutions. An example for you is USB protections. That's an OIG finding from back in 2019. There was a technological solution proposed back then. What we're looking at now is something different, more cost effective, and more resource effective. So we are going to implement all of the recommendations, maybe with just newer technology.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anybody else want to weigh in? Seeing nothing else, I think you're off the hook, sir. Thank you
All right.
so much. Really, on behalf of the RAC, we really appreciate the time and all your candid answers. It's been very informative for us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, and have a good night.
All right.
Okay, so again, thanks to Mr. Waugh for that. We are going to move on. I believe we have Ms. Kim and Mr. Hiat, if I said that correctly. Better bus updates regarding the network redesign. And one of the things I know that's been a big priority for Metro, which kind of hasn't, at least the perception is it hasn't been for a while, has been buses. Seems like trains were always kind of the big thing and buses were an afterthought, at least in public conversations. So the fact that the buses are being discussed very regularly is very important, and the RAC is always, and we really appreciate people coming to help us with this. I know the Better Bus project has been around. I know since I've been coming to RAC meetings, it's been something that has been going in various phases and is a long-term project that they're working really hard on. So on that note, I will turn the floor over to both of you to introduce yourselves and do your presentation. We look forward to it.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll start with my introduction because then Melissa's she can introduce herself and she's gonna have the bulk of the presentation. But it's really nice to be in front of you virtually. My name is Jeff Hyatt. I know it's kind of my last name gets mispronounced a lot of time, but it's like Hyatt Hotel. So so no worries there. But I am a senior vice president of bus transformation at WMATA. I'm just going to take a couple minutes to give you a little bit of my background in this role, since I haven't been able to get in front of you and have a conversation. But I'm going to start by just echoing Michael's sentiment that it is really, really exciting that bus has been as equally prominent at WMATA, and there's so much thought and from the leadership all the way down the importance of this mode and how it serves the community. And I think it's, we are one agency that provides service. It's not a rail, agency. It's not a bus agency. It's not a paratransit agency. We are a transit agency. So what is perceived to have a lot of attention on bus is I don't think it may feel new, but it's certainly not going to end, because we will continue to really strive to make sure that bus is an equally good and safe alternative to anybody's mode of transportation. So a little bit of my background. I've been at Metro now for a little less than 6 months. I was at Cap Metro in Austin for a couple years. Prior to that, I was in DC for 17 years prior to that. So called DC is really my home. And I've been in the industry from consulting. I also worked for the American Public Transportation Agents Association for about 15 years. So, and most of all of that has been in the bus world. So I really, buses is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm really happy to be here at WMATA in this role, where essentially this, this role in bus transformation, have rail transformation counterpart with Lynn Bowersox. But it's really to be able to look at, manage at a strategic level all of our bus projects and bus programs and initiatives to kind of at that 10,000 foot level to really help understand what all projects are underway, kind of be that thread so that we can manage them more strategically, help set priorities, help understand, what our riders are expecting, what they need, what they want, so that we can implement, those initiatives and those requests and work that into our project list, and really kind of evaluate, just kind of be that supportive role to work with all of our different groups and different departments, understand how they're all interconnected and where the interdependencies are, so that we can be very efficient as we also implement these programs and projects as well. So that's who I am. I'm excited to, again, I'm going to have a very short piece of this presentation. The bulk of it is Melissa's, so I'll let Melissa introduce herself and kick it off, and I'll be happy to, as we get done, answer any questions, talk to you a little bit more as well about what we're doing if you have questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Is everyone able to see my screen right now? The
Yes.
presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I'm Melissa Kim. I'm in the Office of Planning at Metro, and I'm a deputy project manager on the bus network redesign. And so Jeff just recently presented to the board along with Allison Davis on a bunch of bus customer modernization efforts that are ongoing. And so we figured it was a good time to bring these two presentations on the network redesign and modernizing the bus experience together. So that's why we're here. So thanks again for having us. As Michael mentioned, we've come to the RAC a number of times throughout the course of the project, so we're happy to be back. Always appreciative of your time. Quick overview of what we'll be getting into, and this is mostly a briefing to provide you a little bit of an update. Since we last came, I think it must have been May-ish timeframe. So I'm going to give a quick update, project timeline and status. I know there's a couple of new members from what I understand, so we want to give a little bit of background. I'll jump into some of the findings and results from our last round of engagement, and then really quickly touch on the route renaming survey and effort that is both part of the bus network redesign, but also part of modernizing the bus experience. And then I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, who's going to finish up the presentation and get into bus stop amenities and improving connections across our system. And feel free, as I'm going through, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in, or we can take them all at the end, whatever works best for you all. But again, since I know there's a couple of new members, wanted to make sure to start by providing a little bit of quick background on the project itself. We kicked off the Better Bus Network redesign mid last year, and it's part of the agency's larger Better Bus initiative. The network redesign is just one of many ways that the agency is rethinking and redesigning and revitalizing bus service, and a lot of those other ways actually fall under Jeff's purview. So other things that Jeff is going to speak to today is the bus stop and shelter improvements, customer information, and other items that fall under here as well that we won't speak to today, but are part of the initiative are zero emission vehicles, priority lanes and signals. So it's a really large initiative. In terms of the Better Bus Network redesign specifically, as I mentioned, we kicked the project off middle of last year, and a bus network redesign is something that many of our peers have done or are doing. And it's really an exciting opportunity for us at Metro. Before this project, we hadn't looked holistically at our bus network since it was developed over 50 years ago. So through this project, we can work to address a lot of the needs shown here on this slide. So making sure we're connecting to where people need to go and building a network that promotes equity, and making sure our network is easy to use and understand. So where we are in the project now, we started the project with kind of an existing service analysis and trying to understand holistically travel patterns across the region. We had an engagement effort, and all of that built up to building what we're calling the visionary bus network, which is really the bus network that the region needs, and that would provide more expanded frequent service, more service that operates all day, all week, increased crosstown and cross-county connections, new service that goes beyond jurisdictional borders where it makes sense for customers, and really better connects key destinations with a focus on providing that connection directly, frequently. So that network was actually taken out to the public as part of our engagement phase that took place between April and June. And it was a pretty extensive public and stakeholder engagement phase. Again, we came to you all, got input from you all, and also really appreciate you all spreading the word about the effort, and that we wanted to hear from anyone and everyone. And a large part of what I'll be covering today is what we heard from you all in the public during that engagement period. So during the last round of engagement, we got over 8,000 route-specific comments, and the team has gone through each of these comments and has been working diligently on revising the draft visionary network, and also developing our draft year one network, which is what we're planning to bring out to the public and to stakeholders early next year. And the year one network is really intended to be the first step to implement the visionary bus network, but it starts using the resources available today. So this network is intended to be transformative, and it's intended to provide more equitable service, reallocate resources to best meet the region's goals for bus service, and really provide that base that we can build upon in the future. So this is kind of a very, very high level what took place between April and June of this year. So through our engagement, we interacted with over 20,000 customers and non-customers, and this was through over 60 public events. So that included everything from our really large scale workshops that we had across the region to pop-ups that we held at the different metro stations and farmers markets and other locations across the region, and also bus ride-alongs and lunch and learn webinars. And I think it's important to note that over 20% of that engagement and interaction with folks was in a language other than English. And through those interactions and through our online tools, we got over 8,000 route-specific comments, as I mentioned before. We also made sure to go out to each of our divisions to get input from bus operations staff that are out on the front lines operating our buses every day. And from them, we got an additional 360 about comments. We briefed and engaged over 100 elected officials. We came to advocacy groups, community-based organizations, and committees like the RAC. So thank you all again for your engagement and your participation during the last round when we were out at the public. And in addition to the in-person and stakeholder events, we had a really large digital campaign to drive people to our website where they could provide both specific route comments and also take our survey. And that included multilingual advertising campaigns, social media campaigns. It was a really large scale effort. And so some of what we heard, I'll make sure that John afterwards has a link to our phase 2 engagement summary, which has even more detail. With our limited time, wasn't able to dive into all of the results. So this is kind of like a high level what we heard, but I'll make sure that we send you all the link to that kind of larger engagement document that gets at more of what we did and also what we heard. But at a very high level, the majority of respondents had a positive impression of the draft visionary network that we took out. And interesting to know that that varied pretty significantly based on how they engaged with the materials. So 70% of people that came to hear about the draft visionary network at an in-person event had a positive impression, whereas less than half of people, 49%, had a positive impression if they engaged only digitally with our survey. We also found that 70% of low-income respondents thought that the proposed network was somewhat or much better, and 68% of respondents who were people of color. The majority of feedback that we got was related to route-specific comments. So as I mentioned, our team has been working really hard sifting through the 8,000 comments that were received, and that included comments from a number of different sources. So we had a comment on your route tool, which was an online tool where people could tag a route and leave a comment. Operator feedbacks. We had ride-along surveys, social media, letters from stakeholders, and many more ways that we received comment. So we are reading through each one of these, and we've prepared actually a summary of the feedback that we received on each route in the visionary network. Which is another thing that I'll make sure to get into John's hands to distribute to this group so that you can see what we heard about each of the routes that we proposed. And then by the time that we come back out for our next phase of engagement, we will have responses, thematic responses in terms of how we address those. Really quickly, about half of the comments related to route alignment. So that could either be positive or negative, but specific comments on where the routes were actually going. And we also heard a lot about level of service, so how frequently the different routes were going to be operating in our visionary network. And that brings us to where we are now. So we're making revisions to the visionary network based on comments and ideas from the public, stakeholders, and elected officials. So again, the team read through all 8,000 comments, and the comments are being used along with an additional review of the data on travel needs and demand to make sure that when we're addressing comments, we're still meeting the project goals, so that revisions to the visionary network will continue to prioritize equity, connectivity, and the customer and operator experience. And again, we want to make sure that even as we address the comments and make revisions to the visionary network, we're really trying to meet these same goals that build a better bus network. And then really, really quickly, I believe that John sent you all the survey that we had open very briefly on route renaming. So I wanted to give a quick kind of update on the route renaming effort. As we're redesigning the bus network, it's really the perfect time to consider renaming our routes, recognizing that not only are we kind of cutting and splicing and changing the routes that exist today, but we're also putting in potentially new routes out there. So we really want to think through the opportunities that there are to make our route names, our bus route names, more intuitive, and to come up with a naming convention that can accommodate future changes, and also really think through how any naming convention can be communicated across all the ways that people take in information about bus. So we, prior to the survey, did a significant in-depth interview effort where we interacted with customers, non-customers, lapsed customers to get a sense of what they understand and remember and find most useful in route renaming. So from that customer research, we learned that there really is feedback for opening this up and having a discussion about changing the route names, but only if it makes the route names simpler and easier to understand. Some of the high-level findings that we got were that streets provide the most useful information. So we know there are a number of streets that we provide service mainly along those streets. So there is maybe an opportunity to use and incorporate that in naming. We also heard that states are the easiest to understand and learn. So using a D, an M, or a V in front of a numbering system was something that people thought was easy to understand. Interesting. We found this interesting that a lot of people that we had these in-depth interviews with noted that frequency is important to know, but not necessarily in the route name itself. So it can be shown through other methods, like thicker lines on a map, that type of thing. We also heard that 3-digit numbering was harder for people to remember, and that people really were looking for a mixture of letters and numbers to understand the system. So we know there's not one size fits all perfect way to make this really easy to understand, but we're really trying to think through how can we come up with something easier to understand, an easier to understand naming convention that works for a majority of our routes. So we just closed our public survey out, and we also had, because we understand that a public survey won't necessarily reach everyone, so we also did a demographically representative sample survey of about 1,000 customers and non-customers. And we're, next steps for that, going to use the results of those surveys to come up with an initial naming convention that we're going to apply to the draft Year One network that we will be bringing out to you and to the public in January. Once we bring that out, there will be many more opportunities to give inputs on that naming convention. So if you weren't able to take that survey, this is not the final time to engage with that part of the network redesign. And then now I'm going to hand it over to Jeff.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. If you can go to the next slide, please. All right. So as we've already talked about, Melissa mentioned it too, part of this whole Better Bus initiative, really is grounded around building a better bus experience. And part of everything that we do as we look at these different initiatives and different projects is we are really focusing on the customer and making sure that our customers are really at the center of our decisions. So we are listening to the riders, and that we are actually implementing these different initiatives and different programs that really are enhancing their experience, are really answering what their needs are. And a lot of that is focusing on how to use the system, how are we riding the bus, how are we getting information, are we providing good, consistent information, and information. Again, this is from our whole network. So the information that you see if you are in a rail station and how that's presented, does it look the same and feel the same when you are getting on a bus? And we have this real-time information so that we can provide updated information. We know if there are emergencies and detours, that we have a way to really provide consistent information to everyone in our system, regardless of what mode of transportation they're riding. And of course, equity is the lens that we use for everything that we do. We strive and ensure that we are being equitable in all the senses of the word as we implement all of these programs and projects. And so we recognize that we are not the only agency in our region. Of course, we're the biggest one, but we want to make sure that we engage everyone in our region to make bus transportation in general, easier for riders to use all across the DMV. And so that's having the communication with our regional partners, and from the DC Circulator to the agencies in Maryland, and also those in Virginia, that we work together. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how we're doing that. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Melissa. One of these initiatives is looking at our bus stops, and how we can provide consistency on what is available and how our bus stops are designed. You may or may not be aware, that WMATA does not own all the shelters you see out there or maintain them, essentially, except what's at our rail stations and our bus loops. Those are the only shelters that we own. Now we have the signs. You see the signs all over, with the signpost on it. That's ours. But the shelters you see throughout the region, those are actually owned and maintained by, that county, by the district, by someone else. And you see different different amenities at these bus stops. So there is a committee, the National Capital Region Bus Leaders Committee, and part of that committee is to really look at how we can work together, how we can leverage each other, and learning of what we can do, establish standardized guidelines, and just really understand that we are a regional network working for our rider at the center of our attention. So part of these guidelines that we will be developing that will provide this consistency of what's available. Is it just a bus stop? Is there real-time information there? Do we have a shelter? What constitutes what place in a shelter? Is it a certain number of people that utilize that stop? Does the stop just need a seat and a trash can? So it's kind of looking at different levels and how we can make that consistent. So if you are, getting on a bus, on the bus in PG County, and getting off a bus in Arlington, and you might need to connect somehow on rail or bus within DC, that you don't see a big difference in what you're getting, and that we all have the same thing. So it's making sure we have the same lighting so that the safety, security elements are there, and again, all these other amenities. Next slide, please, Melissa. So this is a list of all of our regional partners and who we work with. And again, this is, working with all of them so we can create consistent information. We are starting by having our own real-time information that we are displaying at bus stops. You may have seen some at some of our signs have like the 13-inch e-paper displays, and we will work to bring more of those out into the system. But we also want our partners and all of them to work with them to provide that same type of real-time information. If we share a stop, we can utilize their information as well, so that again, a rider's not really seeing a difference, but they might get a different color bus, but they can see the same time information. They know that the wayfinding is going to be consistent. We have maps that show all of our network. So we really just want to make it easier for everyone in our community and our region to really understand how to use the services, and be better interconnected, just to make that experience all across our networks to be easy and smooth. Melissa, next slide, please. And you can go one more. So just to sum up, Melissa did a great job talking through where we are in the bus network redesign. They'll be continuing to developing these engagement tools, going through this, the renaming survey and getting all of that information. For something like the bus stops, we're going to work on with our partners to work through these guidelines, see where we can make improvements, see where we can provide that consistency. And then on this route renaming, utilizing all of the survey responses and apply that to our draft year one network that will be coming out soon. I think that wraps it up for us, and we can open it up for questions.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate that, as always, that extensive presentation. I think everyone's always looking forward to Better Bus Network and as it kind of develops. Let's go to, we have a couple questions on here. Dina first.
Hi, good evening, Dina Passman. Thank you so much for presenting. It was really interesting. I'm a huge fan of the bus, so really excited to see what you guys end up implementing in DC. I hate the double questions, but I'm going to put two things out there. One is I hear a lot of talk of equitable service, and one thing that I've always struggled to understand is how that covers the transit needs of caregivers and people transporting children and elderly folks or someone who's sick through the system or to school, and then also LGBTQIA plus folks who are, subject to issues around safety on public transportation. So sort of that's the first one, is like, does your definition of equity include these groups? And then the second one is on the naming conventions. And my question, I guess it's really about everything, is to what degree do you look at best practices globally in order to sort of help you find the way?
I can start with the renaming, and then I don't know, Jeff, if you want to jump into the equity question, and I can also hop in after that. But in terms of the route renaming, the part of the team has actually been working on the renaming effort for almost as long as the project has been ongoing. And so we really started this project by diving into best practices of what other agencies have done. So for the sake of time, I didn't include any of that in this presentation, but in the presentation that Jeff and Allison gave to the board, where they talked about route renaming and these other efforts, we did give kind of a high-level overview of what some of our peers locally do, as well as what our peers nationally do. And that did inform what we took out and talked to folks about as part of these in-depth interviews and what we included in our survey.
Okay, that's great, because if you asked me how to do it, I'd be like, I don't know, can I have something to react to in order to help move through that process? Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just tag along to that first, and then I'll talk about the equity part of your question. Part of in our transformation office, and on the rail side, and then just with our whole strategic plan, strategic transformation plan, and looking at our enterprise transformation plan, we are developing these activation plans. So that's kind of the activation part of our strategic transformation plan. So we're getting to that stage, and in doing that, as we our goal is to be a world-class transit system. And part of that is, again, looking at what our peers are doing, not only in the US, but around the world, seeing what they've done, learning from them, and seeing how we can, utilize a lot of their successes to really continue to help us grow into a world-class system in DC. Not that we're not, but we can always get better. From that equity piece, and I think it's a great question to really understand our community and understand all of the different people that are using our system, the different needs that folks have that require just from a utilization standpoint, but also from a perception and a feeling of safe and secure as they ride our system. We do have a new DEI office here and a VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and so that is not just an internal piece, which is also important to establish an organization, is making sure that we build that up internally within the agency. But there very much is that a component to look how, again, at our customers and users of the system and making sure that all of those different voices are heard and recognized. You will see in next month's, I believe it's next month's board meeting, there's going to be a presentation on that, and I think so you'll see kind of how a lot of those initiatives are being implemented. But I think that you'll notice that we recognize all of these differences. We understand, and we want to make sure that we are providing a good experience for everyone. We've, I'll say, general speaking, we've updated for parents or caregivers, others with strollers and other needs. We have a new policy that allows you to bring an open stroller onto a bus, which prior, was not something that we did. So, and that made it very difficult. We constantly are, on our paratransit side and Metro Access, making sure that we are able to accommodate the caregivers and anyone, with all their abilities, and also work with people of different abilities and the caregivers to make sure that they can use our network so they don't always, have to rely on access, which is, sometimes challenging scheduling trips if we can train them to use our system. So I think, we are doing a lot more, and you'll hear a lot more about that too. And it is certainly something I think coming down from our general manager that is very important as we look at all of these things that we're doing to make the whole experience better.
Thank you.
Jose.
Yeah, and I wanted to first say thank you to both of you for talking about the Better Bus network and all the work that you guys are doing. Actually, one of the reasons why I wanted to join the RAC in the first place was I drank the Kool-Aid when I read Better Bus, Better Cities by Steve. Can't pronounce his last name, but it was very informative, and I think you guys are doing exactly some of the things, the recommendations that they are doing in his book, but not all of them, which is great. And one of the things I really appreciate about just the kind of those draft visionary route profiles is not from an equity lens, is also access to grocery stores and stuff like that. So some of like the Virginia routes were actually saying, hey, look, you can go from let me just spitball one. You can. There's a bus stop by the Lidl, or there's one by the Harris Teeter. And I think one of the other things is when we're thinking about equity lens, we should think about the big picture as well too. Some of these draft networks also unlock access to existing parks in both Virginia and DC and Maryland, where maybe they're not highlighted, but I can imagine along the route there's a bus stop in front of like a Fairfax County Park, or along the WND and Virginia and vice versa. I know there's not a bus route that takes you to Great Falls. That's not probably what's proposed in this one, but we have a lot of existing assets, and this is helping unlock that from not just from going to groceries or to the hospital, but better access to parks, without having the need to get in a car. I took this survey on the renaming conventions, and actually maybe I'm holding dearly the C2 route just from when I was a little kid getting across University Boulevard. But I know some of the difficulties that will arise is that not all streets carry across jurisdictions. Like we got Langston Boulevard in Arlington, and then once you get to Fairfax is Arlington Boulevard. So it probably doesn't make sense to call it the LA line or whatever. But I know you guys are going to work through that. It does make sense for the number streets in DC. And I'm happy you touched on looking at the whole network as well, as far as like the experience for the riders, because as someone that walks maybe like a nice 10 to 15 minute walk to my closest bus stop, not all the bus shelters are maintained. And I remember reading a report maybe like several years ago where it was in PG County, like there was like one that got hit by a car, and then it was wasn't like a finger point or anything like that. But then WMATA's like, well, we don't maintain it. So whatever the outcome of it is just also that education piece of like how to call in certain complaints. And
Yeah.
you know, I was aware that, you know, like you guys maintained the polls, and I remember I had put it into WMATA via what's called X now, not Twitter, and they were able to respond right away and put it right back up in the next day or two, which was great. But you know, from the whole experience, from the moment they're walking, maybe from where they live or where they're coming off of work, thinking about that lighting holistically, you know, I know Virginia, we have Dominion and I forgot the other company, but working with those, you know, those partners and trying to make sure that we're getting the right things in the right areas is important. As far as if we're gonna do this effort, we should do it right, and I'm happy that you guys are looking at those things as well. My only question is, what's the next, like, I know you guys share the timeline, and I know you guys will try to come back to the rack. What are some of the, I guess, what are some of the things that you guys are struggling from phase 2 into phase 3, and kind of just trying to understand kind of more or less some of the internal wrestling that you guys are going through?
So I can speak a little bit more to the process and why there is kind of a large gap between June, when we were last out with the Visionary Network, and the beginning of next year. So first, we wanted to make sure that we left enough time to really go through all of the comments we knew we were going to receive, and that is a labor-intensive process when you also then want to not just look solely at the comments, but also at the underlying data in those areas as well, to make sure that we're making an informed decision on the changes that we're making. And the other thing that we really wanted to do was build in some additional time to be able to kind of run, well, so the next step, but beyond developing the revised Visionary Network, is then this year 1 network, which is within existing resources, the first step towards the Visionary Network. And we'll be taking, that's really what will be the focus of the next round of engagement. So we wanted to also build in enough time to run initial metrics on that year 1 network, and then make sure that, hey, this is something that we need to take a closer look at. So what we're taking out to the public is something that is really well thought out, and that we know that we can put on the ground in the following year. So there's kind of a lot of work. There's also collaboration with jurisdictional partners that's ongoing. So we're having a lot of conversations with folks that run all of the other agencies that were on the slide that Jeff spoke to earlier, making sure, because there are some agencies that are a part of this effort, the bus, namely, and City of Fairfax Q. But the other providers, we also want to make sure that the recommendations that we're putting out there do really work well with what they currently run. So that is also kind of an important part of the process, is making sure that we're building this collaboratively, and that hopefully ultimately in the end will make it easier to implement as well. So that's kind of a lot of what we're working through right now. And to be honest, I think it takes a long time to develop materials that are easy to understand on something so complex. And it's really critical that we make them easy to understand, because we need the comments from the public. And so that's another thing that does take, I think, more time than we would expect, than others would expect, is to really build out all of those materials. So all the route profiles, to make the materials online that are easy for people to interact with and provide their comment. Because ultimately the point of any of the engagement is really to get the feedback, and so to do that, we need to have really good materials that we take out. So that's kind of what we're working through generally, what we've been working through since kind of the close of engagement.
Mahalia.
No, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. Like, that was it.
And thanks also for your comments. We've noted, like,
Yeah.
I jotted down some stuff that I appreciate it.
Yeah, very good comments. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I was looking at the list of partners that you had in the different jurisdictions, and one that came to mind that it's not necessarily bus related, but also transportation, is Capital Bike Share. And I know it's owned by the different jurisdictions. And I bring this up because the number of times I've seen a cabbie bike on the bike rack is very alarming. And I know, like, I'm a cabbie user, and I know that is against the user policy, and it is owned by the different jurisdictions, so it's public property, and that's in a way like it's theft. And I'm wondering if there has been any push to address that. I know you probably don't want drivers interacting, with people carrying a stolen bike, but yeah, just curious if that has come to your attention, and if there's anything that you are able to do about it, or the different partners, if that's ever come up.
Yeah, I would speak to that, but I don't really have an answer for you. I think it's one that we have to find out how we address something like that, because it definitely is recognized that's not part of how that system works. And as you know, and certainly, and as you stated, I mean, there are certain things that our bus operators will engage in, and really, and just where they just can't. But there are also maybe some opportunities to at least, reach out to alert someone to say, hey, we know we have a bike on this bus, and it can be retrieved somehow. But it's a great question, and I think it's something we'll have to get back to you, is to see if that is something that has been addressed, and if they've addressed it, there is a way to do it, or if they've addressed it, there's not, or maybe it hasn't been thought about at all. But I think it's a good point to raise, because I'm also a bike share user. I love riding our bus and our rail, but on nice days, I ride the bike to and from my house in here, and and it bugs me when I see bikes sitting out there that are in the system. I'm like, I could add a bike. So I get it. But yeah, Melissa, I mean, I don't know if you possibly have know anything more than that. Okay. So I'll certainly take that down and make sure we get back to you, just to see what kind of response it is from our team out there that manages stuff like that.
Thank you both for coming here and sharing with us and answering our questions. I'm sure we will all be in touch. I think the RAC will, we'll kind of talk amongst ourselves over the next couple months for hopefully to get some informed recommendations, particularly regarding the naming conventions and things like that, based on our own outreach, networks and connections. On that note, unless there's anybody else wants anything to add, I think in the interest of time, we should move on to the next thing. But again, thank you so much. That was excellent as always.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to move on. I see Mr. Anderson is on the line regarding reimagining wayfinding. I know there's a slide deck on there. Brian Anderson, I know there's another Brian on here. Just to let you know. Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say that. Oh, I think that sound got all weird on me. What I was going to say was that I think we're going to have a hard stop on this presentation. It's really important. I want to make sure that we give it the thrift or the stuff that we need, so we can actually have questions meaningful. But 7:45, we need to get into a couple other things. But on that note, please go ahead, and we will give you our full attention.
Good evening, everyone. How's everyone doing? Thanks
We are doing
for
excellent.
taking me later than started. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you today. I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes.
Sarah extends her apologies for not being able to meet all of you for the first time, but we will make sure that she has that opportunity as quickly as possible. Allow me, if I may, I'm Brian Anderson. I'm our Director of Customer Innovation and Technology. If I can just give a quick background on myself, I have been at Metro for 12 years. I've been in the industry nearly 20. where I worked at SEPTA before this, managing passenger information technology and other initiatives. But I got my transit start as one of you all similarly. So in Philadelphia, I was on the Citizens Advisory Committee, where I advocated for transit all around Philadelphia while in college and shortly after. And one day I was lucky enough to get a job in transit. So that's where I sit here today. So I have utter respect and a great point and a great point of view to hear all of you and have an open conversation. Okay. I was hoping I just have the opportunity to go through the deck and then take questions, but if you all are managing this style differently, please feel free to interrupt me and we can talk through it as we go. It's totally up to you. This is a conversation in an open forum. Okay. So I'm here to talk about customer experience and how we are reimagining and sort of rebuilding our customer service marketing, communications, engagement, government relations arm here in the organization, led by Sarah Meyer, who was previously Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at New York City Transit. In New York, she has a wealth of communications experience in the private sector, but very passionate about the customer and building a good experience. So all of this ladders up to our strategic transformation plan. Under service excellence, we really want to make sure that we deliver the best possible experience, even when times get rough. But when it all starts internally. So that's why our focus is on building that customer experience practice and focusing on technology enhancements, public engagement enhancements, and taking a fresh look at how we communicate, engage, have two-way conversations in customer service, and do our marketing to make Metro the most attractive option that it can be in the region. We definitely want to improve wayfinding. We'll talk a lot more about that in detail in moments. And like I said, focus on technology and digital infrastructure. So to put it bluntly, we could do a lot better. A lot of our systems are siloed and fragmented, and they are catching up on age. We're not working with the most modern systems in an age where sometimes our mobile phone and customers are using very flexible modern technologies, and we want to be able to match that. And all of this is to streamline the information that we give out to customers and be very customer centric in being a mobility provider in the region. And then we also, part of what tonight is, proactively engage with the community and our regional transit partners. So we're doing this together rather than, again, having a siloed approach and breaking down the barriers that have kept us from progressing forward faster sooner. Next. So just to talk through some industry trends, we're always looking across the globe at seeing who's doing it best. We've seen even within the United States that some of our West Coast agencies are starting to rethink wayfinding and other passenger information and customer experience initiatives. So on the left, you'll see how Sound Transit, while they're a growing system up in the Pacific Northwest, they began to rethink their service labels with line numbers, shapes, colors, versus just naming their lines. And Los Angeles, also in preparation for the Olympics in 2028, started undergoing a refined wayfinding approach to line letters for their rail service and their rapid bus service. Research and some of these industry practices show that it helps create a unified network and for easier to understand and more accessible and equitable. Next. So as we work together, we want to be at the center of a comprehensive regional mobility network. We definitely want to support growing regional transit ridership, but we want to attract new or infrequent riders to our system. We all talk about that post-pandemic ridership recovery, and tapping into markets like new and infrequent riders is extremely important, and making transit attractive during the non-peak hours with frequent services and easy to navigate services. So what we've done in the last couple of weeks is we've started a regional conversation with partners where we've been able to begin to talk through ideas on how to improve information and wayfinding. Our ultimate dream and the North Star is sort of having that collective regional network identity and working in conjunction with projects like Better Bus and the network redesign, as well as some other initiatives, starting to really have that holistic approach, similar to what we see some of our peers in the industry are doing. Next. So we start with a customer journey map. So there's 7 steps along this, and John's helping me drive this presentation. So as he presses the button, you'll see different steps, but it starts with the consideration of Metro as your travel option. And then we move to planning to take Metro. A lot of trip tools and information is available even before you step foot on our property. Then you have to pay to ride, and we really want to drive home mobile use. Then once you're here, you need to navigate our system. So whether that's just rail, just bus, connectivities from regional partners to one of our modes, or intermodal, we need to make sure we have a good experience, as I mentioned. Then we move to waiting for the vehicle, riding the service, and then of course, following up post-travel. So let's take this journey one step at a time. So under the consideration, our goal is to have people choose to take Metro with our brand propositions that transit is faster, safer, cheaper, and more sustainable than other modes. We face a great challenge because, as I mentioned, our customers have a lot of digital power in their pocket with mobile phones and are savvy, and they're heavy social media users. So sometimes rare negative incidents are often over amplified and create a challenge for us to overcome when statistically we provide really good, reliable service and we are a safe system to use. We're also competing with those one-click transportation options. Dare I say them, Uber and Lyft. People reach into their pocket, they can summon a vehicle point to point and go. We want to be able to at least be a considerable option in that world, and of course, winning back lapsed customers. So, like I said before, post-pandemic ridership recovery during the week, but also during the weekend, people's travel habits have changed. So we're really focused on this with our marketing efforts. Next. So next we move to the plan stage. So even when we hopefully have made someone consider Metro, we want to showcase our bus and rail networks and regional partner connections, build confidence in our frequent services, and hopefully you've been seeing that over the past year, where we're running some of the best service that we have run in a really long time. With under 10-minute service on most lines most of the day, and of course announce loudly when service changes occur. We often have planned and unfortunately unplanned incidents, but it's really important that customers know what their options are, know that something is happening, and give them confidence that they can still get to their destination, even if it's a little bit later. But how we do that through both the channels and our actual tone and messaging matters. But our challenge is that we're facing a lot of outdated maps, and we're not region first. But what we also focus on is route-to-route information rather than point-to-point information. And what that means is we know someone might want to go from their home or their hotel to an attraction or their office. So those are two points in their journey, rather than focusing on here's the bus route to the rail route to actually get from your home to your office. And what we've done is over time, we've siloed Metro Bus and Metro Rail. And what we want to do is break that down. And then, as I've mentioned before, we want to begin to upgrade our technology to get rid of some of those antiquated systems. And, we're always chanting one Metro for the voice of the customer. And we need to be able to do that with our technology. Next. So here's an example of what we're doing. We've launched a tool called Metro Pulse. It was in the wake of the retirement of Metro Hero, but we use a lot of our data, and we know how popular Metro Hero was, and we're very thankful for everything that he was able to show us and fans in the region with our data. And so, we've that torch has been passed to us, and we've picked it up with this transparent tool that we launched this summer. Our goal is to add Metro Bus to it and then focus on creating a mobile app and also some new ways to interact with customer service in the new year, as well as including Metro Access vehicle tracking in the new year of 2024. Next. So here's another step in reimagining planning, where we want to look at how and where we display maps. So not only online, but in our apps, in station, at bus stops. As I've mentioned before, we silo the modes, where we're looking at really bringing together the neighborhood and the regional connections. Here's a perfect example that you're looking at on the right, where this is a radius view of one of our rail stations, but in red, you're able to see the bus connections, and also very faintly, but it is there's a little silhouette of a person, so you have an idea of what a 5 to 10 minute walk is like around you. This was our first iteration. We're open to feedback on this, but you can see what's on the roadmap is establishing clearer regional partner connections, like commuter rails of MARC and VRE, the regional buses, the airport, the future Purple Line, and bike share. All of that matters in a comprehensive regional network, but we have to start somewhere. And right now, our experience is a rail map and a bus map, or a bus map overlaid on a neighborhood map, and we're trying to bridge those gaps to make navigation easier. Next. All right, it's everyone's favorite topic, pay. So, our goal is to have easy mobile first payments. We want to establish a very customer-friendly policy with fares, like fare capping. Just if you're unfamiliar, fare capping is where a transit agency would stop charging at a certain threshold. We've seen it in London for years with Oyster. With New York's rollout of Omni, they've begun introducing it, and it's an industry conversation, not only in the United States, but always around the world. It also breaks down the barrier of trying to navigate different fare products, and it makes for a simpler policy where the more you ride, the cheaper your fare is. That's how to simply look at it. But we also want to treat SmartTrip like a regional currency and go beyond transit, and establish regional partnerships with sports teams, local theaters, libraries, other attractions in the region. So transit is an easy connection to the event or the action that you're going to or going to do. But you can see on the right, again, our list of challenges. Our current SmartTrip app is too cumbersome. It's really seen as an account management app than a more comprehensive payment app. Our fare vending machines are very outdated, and we are card-based versus account-based. And that limits the features that we can roll out, and establishing these regional partnerships of creating a regional currency through SmartTrip. And simply put, card-based is when you touch the card to a target, there's actually a read-write action that's happening between the target on the fare gate or the fare box and the card. So you don't know it, but there's a communication there, where we've moved to a world where we're used to having our credit cards or some other cards on our mobile phone, or having the physical cards, but everything links back up into the cloud, where there's one central account, and then how you carry your card or choose to do your payments is up to you. And that's what we want to get to. Next. So you can see that our first focus is on marketing SmartTrip and Wallet. We know that because the SmartTrip app is very cumbersome, that going direct to Apple Wallet or Google Wallet is the priority, and we've begun that already. You'll see some of these campaigns starting now, but they will begin to proliferate around the system this fall. We've already begun introducing new Metro bus fare boxes, and rear door boarding is coming. But on our roadmap is a larger regional conversation and organizational conversation on fare modernization, to mention some of the features that I've already started, like fare capping, but in addition, just using a straight credit card, not needing a separate transit card like SmartTrip, and establishing account management in the cloud for that next generation experience. Next. All right, navigate. Here we come with some of our wayfinding initiatives. So, we want to be the transit provider of choice and create a signage and wayfinding system that is inclusive, and think like a region and not a sole provider. But, part of our challenge, at least on the rail side, is these large scale stations. That brutalist architecture that we're known for is great to look at, but it's a real challenge when trying to put in navigational aids into the system, which, prevent us from hanging things from the ceiling. As mentioned before, we have a long history of patches and silos. We can start to have that conversation of where people observe it. So hopefully, I think that we all know, and we want to change that and begin to clean that up. And again, the historical siloing of bus and rail. So here's a look at what we're doing next. So first, again, we go to worldwide best practices. So there's a lot of digital in here as well, where in New York, you'll see a station ahead list digitally that also shows real-time prediction information. So this is an example at Penn Station in New York that's on 8th Avenue that's served by 3 different transit lines. The local is your next train, and here are all the stops that's going to take. And then underneath, immediately following, are some of your other trains like the A, which in Manhattan is Express, and your E, which is another local train. John, we'll just keep hitting the button here. So, and I'll talk to it. In Asia, some station ahead lists also number the stations. So that's where the CO4, CO5, CO7, you'll start to see the 2, 4, and 6, and that's the number of stops you are from where you are, where the arrow is on the left. We'll keep going. And then also Tokyo has line numbering, which if you've been following the news lately, we are considering. This is a phased approach. So when we think about changing anything from the colors, it's a much deeper, larger conversation, again, with the region and partners like yourself. It's on our roadmap, but it's definitely not a pilot or a launch item. And then here in Europe, you'll start to see boarding locations on screens. That helps with crowding and where to stand along the platform and whatnot. John, you can keep pressing. Here are floor decals. They are real. So it's amazing what printing can do. But you can see that it also helps aid in navigation to amenities or destinations and adds color coding. Next. Next. Again, you can see strong iconography in Stockholm. And next. And then in Hong Kong, they have a really cool feature, which we're very excited to start using, where they not only do they number their entrance and exits, but then they incorporate it into Google Maps and other data feeds in order to have, to aid what we call breadcrumbing, where someone builds confidence as they look at each direction that they're going to the right spot. Next. So here are a couple questions we asked ourselves when we started to rethink wayfinding. Where's my train? You can see, am I on the right platform? Am I on the right track? When is the train coming? Did I get on the right train? And where's the exit? What can I take? Which exit should I take? Okay. These are all questions that have come up through a lot of market research and other studies. And we know that trying to navigate a station has a lot of anxiety. So of course, that's the goal, to reduce it and again, make transit easy. Next. So you can see some percentages. I know that you have this deck, so for the sake of time, I won't read all of this, but you can see that people feel challenged when making decisions on how to navigate Metro. And again, this is the data speaking of the insights that we are starting to turn into action. Next. John, there's a lot of animations here, so just keep pressing and I'll tell you when to stop. So you can take a look at, nope, go back one, sorry. You can take a look at the pylons, right? So before and after. So today everyone's used to our station pylon, which is our version of the beacon that says transit is here, right? So it's the typical brown with the line colors at the top, an illuminated or non-illuminated M. So the stripes have always represented the line color, and there's really no visual directional element. So today, and it started at the 7th and Maryland exit of L'Enfant, and we're looking to roll it out over the next couple of weeks across the pylons at L'Enfant. You'll see more pronounced service labels. There are service discs. An entrance path labeling, similar to what we saw in Hong Kong, like entrance A, and a confirmation that you're at 7th and Maryland. And then some more directional arrows for for accessibility entrances. So in this case, to find the accessible entrance, you just head straight. Next. So here's a look at today's overhead navigation signs. So John, if you keep pressing, you'll see some of the features of these signs where the one above is today where it has limited accessibility direction. We focus only on the train destination and we don't give a good sense of space. We just call it 7th and Maryland and L'Enfant. So what we're trying to do is one, improve the accessibility, introduce this exit path labeling as you see with exit C, and also call out a better sense of place and regional connections, similar to what we are thinking with the maps. And in this case, it's the Air and Space Museums and the VRE trains. Also notice that specific call out to DCA, which the yellow line is the easiest line from L'Enfant to get to the airport. It's similar to what we're building off of when we started the Dulles wayfinding signage pilot. But hopefully this helps customers reaffirm those visitors who need the airport services. The other thing I will say is we are piloting taking away the ordinals, which that's why you see 9th Street rather than 9th Street. Next. So another sign that we are rethinking is the trackside wall sign. So if you're familiar with L'Enfant Plaza, you have this upper level on the left where you have just the station call out, the train direction, and then what we call our station ahead list. Station ahead list is a very challenging thing. I'll get to that in a second, but what we're introducing is more cardinal direction to service. So in this case, instead of saying to Greenbelt, it would say northbound, opposite side, it would say southbound. Keep clicking. So here are some examples of our station ahead list, right? So what we want to do is we want to try to supplement the train destination wayfinding with some cardinal direction. Again, call out regional connections like airport, like commuter rails, VRE, Amtrak, MARC, and give a better sense of space. You can see on the far right that we have skipped some stops. I'm sure that we'll have an open discussion around that. And even though our customer research says it's very practical to have all stops, the challenge we begin to face is making the sign accessible for all. And that's what you'll see on the next slide. There are a lot of arrows. Perfect. One more, John. There you go. All right. So you can see that this is the challenge we face. On the left is strongly preferred by research and our customers that we list all station stops, but we do have some accessibility challenges with some of those stops. But then you can also see on the right, like I said, we put some major stations. We put a number of the upcoming stations and then some major stations with connections there. They're what we call little chevrons, like example between Roslyn and East Falls Church. They're those little marks. Those represent that there are skip stations there. Some later feedback after starting to present this, we've seen that, people do like some sense of place. So we're trying to still strike that balance. We're thinking about dots in between, but maybe no labels, just to kind of confirm that there are more stations in between, but happy to hear a point of view when we have a discussion. Okay. I'll try to move a little faster. I know we're trying to hit 7:45. Here's an example of our map. Using that exit system where we letter the exits for breadcrumbing, and then again, call out walking distance, radius, landmarks, bus connections, all of that good stuff that we talked about in the planning stage, also on this map. I do just want to also call out that we recognize that map, signage, and digital all work as a system. So, while while we recognize that there's a strong preference for all information everywhere, we're trying to position the right information at the right decision points. So someone feels more confident entering the metro system, right, in the planning stage. And then when they're finally there, that they gain confidence in navigating to answer some of those questions and let those insights change into a more positive direction than try to solve every problem everywhere. But open to that feedback and discussion. Next. So here's something that we're doing. We're open to feedback, and we're going to have that discussion here. But if you walk L'Enfant Station today, you'll find this wayfinding way better sign, where when you scan the QR code, you'll see an evolving web page that, for transparency, shows how we got to the choices we did, and then the opportunity to provide additional feedback as we keep rolling out. And later this fall, as mentioned, we're planning more in-station surveying and intercepts where, we'll observe customers and actually talk to them in the field. Next. So waiting is always the challenge. We want to make customers know that the trainer bus is coming and give them confidence in that. So we're embarking down an effort to install more real-time arrival screens at stations and stops. Today we have screens, but some have real-time data, some do not. Again, we've talked about technology. Installation costs are a big thing. It's not as simple as hanging a television for a lot of the reasons we've discussed. And we also, inside, that's part of building a customer experience practice, we don't have a strong user design experience arm. So we're working with limited capacity there and want to begin to change that. So here's how we're changing. Next. If you take a look at a current screen, today, this is what you'll see if you stand at the lower level of L'Enfant Plaza. We show the system map a lot, and then we rotate communications or service information above it. We want to move to the station ahead list where it's more dynamic, similar to New York, where it's offering real-time information, giving the confidence in some of the next stations ahead, and some of the connecting services and opportunities at each of those stations. Next. So when we talk about bus, we love what we call e-paper. So if any of you are familiar with that technology, or many of you might be familiar with that technology because it's the Kindle you hold in your hand today. If you've ever used a Kindle, it represents a plain piece of paper. It's also really good and resilient in a high traffic transit environment like a bus stop outside. It can be run by solar. It can be powered by cellular connectivity. So currently we have 150 of these screens in the region. Our plan is within the next year to install 100 more and, bring all of those into a more integrated technology system that helps us communicate clearer and more directly to the customer next year. But on the left is a current design and on the right is a proposed new design. We're also toying with this new design in what we call dark and light mode. So during the day, you'll see white, and at night, you'll see black, similar to, a mobile phone, just to kind of enhance the experience. Next. Finally, when you're on board, it's most important to know where you're going, where it is you're going to exit, and what's happening if there's a delay. We've talked a lot about the technology so far. I'm not going to keep repeating, but if we move to the next slide, we're making an investment in screens on our bus. We have a lot of screens today throughout our 7,000 series. We're planning even more in the new fleet in the 8,000 series. So our goal is to approach this at least step one through a design standpoint. And you'll see these two examples here. On the left is the rail. So today you might be used to the 7,000 series display looking like it does in this picture. Our goal is to bring it to a more common design, similar to what you see at the bottom. And then we're approaching 100 buses we've ordered that have this new screen here up at the top. But you can see that we've rolled out a very stock user interface, and our goal is to clean up our customer data and present a lot more accessible, friendly user interface design at the bottom. So this will show the next 3 stops, the estimated time that it will take to get to that stop, The 8th Street Northwest plus 18th Street is your next stop. And then we have a space for communications or marketing, or if something's happened to the bus in a future phase, being able to send a direct alert or advisory to customers on board. You'll also see, similar to the railway finding, we've reduced the ordinals and to try to slim down space. And we're also undergoing an effort to clean up our data to make it consistent and easier to consume in an environment like this. Next. Finally, post-travel, we want to be as responsive as possible. We've talked about where in mobile apps or in engagement. So we want to build a customer service team that's responsive 24/7. We're definitely embarking down an effort to strengthen our outreach and engagement teams to make sure that we're in the community, hearing their voices and beginning to act upon it. And then learning more about our customers through market research, having talks like this, participating and leading regional workshops to fix issues and create a safer, more reliable system. But we can't do it without you. So that's why next we want to work together, hear what you have to say, and start improving together.
Thank you so much for
Thank
that
you so much for
presentation.
that
That
presentation.
was really extensive and good.
extensive and good.
Some of the signage and everything like that was really good.
good.
I'm getting feedback on my thing, so I don't know.
feedback on
It's getting really weird. But other than that, I would say we're going to open up for questions really quick on here. I am going to ask the RAC moving forward to consider recommendations for some of the wayfinding, such as like the Tokyo model and the revised signage proposals for the, we can maybe look at it for the month for the next meeting. But Patrick, go ahead.
Thank you, Pat Sheehan. I know you raced through your slides a lot. You have a project that's, I think, going to be a pilot called Waymap. I don't know if you've got it installed in about 40 stations, internal GPS using LiDAR. Was that part of your slides?
No, it was not. But I mean, you bring up a good point, right? Like we have a number of side initiatives that we've sort of started that we are slowly working to begin to figure out where they're at and collapse them into a more broader technology plan. So it kind of goes with the theme that we talked today. We have a lot of siloed systems. And even when, I hear you ask about it, right? You mentioned 40 stations. Our rail network is 90 plus we have countless bus stops. And you are right. Historically, we've embarked down a lot of beaconing, wayfinding, app-based pilots or efforts. I know that the most current one that I believe is still underway is called Waymap, where it's an accessible wayfinding tool that someone uses their mobile phone. It uses GPS and their movement, and then gives them audio directions. It's still supposed to be an active project. I'm sorry I don't have an update, but we can certainly get back to you on that.
Okay. The Carol Lopez with Under Safety is aware of that project. Yeah. Good.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry if you said that. I heard Waymap. So.
Right. Okay.
One quick question for you. Will the app that you envision, integrating onto the buses and the trains, will that include other entities such as like the Fairfax connector? So, for example, I want to take a bus from my house in like Herndon or Reston to Silver Spring. Will I just go on the app and it'll be like, okay, here's what you do. You take this bus from your neighborhood, take you to the metro station, take you, all the way then the next bus. Will that how it would work?
Sorry, I keep getting muted. I don't know if I'm making noise that I'm not supposed to. Yeah, we definitely envision, thinking about a region. And, what it does is it builds off of the technology today. The trip planner on our website does that today. The Smart Trip app looks at regional trip planning as well. Some of the challenge in that, and that's why we have to work together as a region, that some of the challenges is not all regional partners have real-time data feeds. So we try to collect the data as we have it, and we're also trying to be a leader and think about, a more regional feed. So, but yes, we are always thinking about the region, and the app Envision. The next version of the app Envision should and will include regional planning.
Great, thank you.
Great,
Any
thank
other
you.
any other questions
Any other questions
from the group?
from the group?
Sorry about that, Brian. I muted you. This is Jose because we were getting feedback when Michael was talking, so I was trying to avoid that.
This whole time I thought that was me that was causing the problem. So if there's seeing no other questions on there, I would say that you did an excellent job. That was so impressive and helpful, and I definitely learned a lot. And I think this is something that we as a RAC are going to really kind of dive into as the weeks and meetings go forward, so we can kind of assist and provide our recommendations based on our member or writer outreach and things like that. Oh, I see
Please
two
do.
hands up, John and Dina now.
I
John,
was
go
just
first.
gonna follow on that, as Brian has shown with all of the with all of the improvements or pilots that are going on in LaFont, I think at some point, once those get a little bit more baked in terms of what's out there, I think there may be some opportunities to get a better look and I don't want to say hands-on, but eyes-on review of those to get your feedback. So this is a project that that the authority is going to be working on for a while. So this is a fantastic introduction, and it gives you all a lot to think about over the next several months.
Thank you, and definitely agree with that. Dina.
Thanks for the great presentation. I do have a ton of questions. There's no time for them right now, so I think it would be great if we could all spend some more time together. I love all of these things, and would love to have the opportunity to take a deeper dive. I go to L'Enfant Station all the time, so I have noticed a lot of things going on. That's exciting. Thanks.
So let's do this, and Brian, I'll tell you this for your edification as well. What we'll do is I'm going to ask John, he kind of creates our agendas, to put it on just for us internal as a RAC to have a conversation about this during our next meeting, so we can kind of have the month, digest what you said, relook at the slides, and then have a really more robust conversation. And in the meantime, will talk with our outreach through our writers that we talk to in our networks to kind of really see what people think and what we think. If that sounds good for everybody else. Great, Brian. Thank you so
And
much.
thank
That
you
was
so
amazing.
much. That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And we're always looking for tidbits. So any questions, comments, send them through John, or I'm sure you've already engaged over email with Sarah. I know I see a fair number of them, and even if you want to pop a few things in the chat for us to think about over the next couple weeks, I'm open to that as well. But thanks for having me. I'm sorry if I went longer, but
Perfect. No, you're
I'm
perfect.
glad
You're great.
everyone was receptive and really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so in our next time we have left, we have four things. Brian has something he wants to talk about that's related to our member outreach. Dina brought up the fact that WMATA is developing a gender action plan, and she has an idea for getting information. And then John had some information that he emailed to us. So I know Brian need to get out of here. We're going to go through this quickly, then I'm going to talk about our writer voice and engagement part really quick. But Brian mentioned concerning the budget issue, and in particular, the recent Finance and Capital Committee meeting that we both watched. Some of you might have watched it as well. And he wondered whether staff lead that handles that and talked about it is interested at all in engaging with the RAC and addressing this 3% growth cap on the operational local subsidy for OMATA, which is a huge major legislative hurdle that can really kind of tank the budget aspirations of OMATA. Brian, if you're still here, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much summed it up. If you are not familiar with the FY25 budget situation, certainly try to research it. The Finance and Capital meeting from the last meeting in late September is a good start because it will talk about some of the legislative hurdles that are imminent, that are going to be coming up in the next couple of months. But that's just something I was kind of curious about and seeing what people thought about it. And I think this pretty much ties in, Mike, with some of the rider engagement that you were talking about that we've talked offline, which is letting the board and the entire our local officials know what the impact is if this does not change. and that, what are the consequences going to be in terms of the average citizen if, the budget does not, you know, uh, become solvent or change.
So yeah, let me jump on, so just kind of go back to our outreach part of it, but so to what Brian was saying, and I think we can kind of like reconcile what he's talking about, getting this information, interacting with the staff leads on this legislative issue, because it is a huge deal. It came up at the meeting, the board meeting, and it was like kind of mind blowing in many ways. um, and she can really explain it and get that. But here's the main thing that Brian was touching on. If we can each find at least, and we talked about this, at least find one person, each of us, that's willing to share their personal story to the board, that can be very helpful to overall to the riders, particularly in this context, because this is where we can contact our respective networks that we discussed a few meetings ago. Like, for example, I plan on contacting like the Reston Association and some like Herndon community groups, to see if they can put me in touch with diverse group of riders concerned about the budget ramifications. And and if each of you can do the same, or otherwise identify a rider willing to speak, it should be a diverse group from across the transit zone. I know DC 10, they're doing the same thing with theirs, and we've asked the AAC as well through Patrick. But and also let us know if I email if you are willing to speak at a board meeting about your personal stories. So here's some ideas kind of been kicking around that Brian alluded to, and it kind of touches on the bigger legislative issue, because the idea behind the personalized rider stories is not just to talk to the board, and be like, hey, here's riders as much. It's more of like, it's always been to try and get the attention of Virginia and Maryland lawmakers, among others, due to some vital, these funding limitations that only the legislators can address, that can really tank what we're talking about. There's like a 3% cap, so they can't even give us more money if they wanted to, based on the current paradigms. And so perhaps we can consider, and here's some ideas just kicking around, trying to, if we can get enough riders together to go speak to the board, have a whole parade of them, just telling their personal stories, us doing the same thing. We can consider trying to publish an op-ed in the Post that doesn't lobby per se, because we're not a lobbying group, but instead highlights the troubles riders will face without legislative changes, and instead kind of advertises the fact that the rider or the RAC is engaging with these riders to hear their stories. And if we get speakers again at the board meeting, then we can also maybe draft a letter to legislators asking them to pay attention to the riders' stories. So it's not lobbying, it's just like, hey, you should pay attention to these people. And if we took these extra steps, again, it's kind of like lobbying. Thanks, Brian. If it's kind of like the lobbying line without, it's walking up to the line without crossing it. We could, of course, coordinate with staff in WMATA, and also letters we can write also could be co-signed by DC 10 and the AAC. But again, in order to get there, we need writer voices. And so the question for you, and you don't have to answer it now if you want to send it via email, is have you identified anyone? Can you try, please, and myself included, try to at least identify one person, whether it's through your networks, kind of, again, that exercise that we did with Brian a few months ago, where who do we know, who are our organizations? This is the time where we can contact them to find some writers to speak out on their own behalf, really. And again, of course, you can do it by email because of the time factor tonight, but any outreach ideas that you do have beyond this, feel free to raise them or email them to the group, and we can address that. Before we get to Dina and then close this out, and one thing that John wanted to add, I just wanted to open up the floor in the time we have left. If anyone has any thoughts on kind of, I know it's a lot that I just brought up, but what you have to think about that, if we're on the right track with the way we're thinking, and if that kind of thing. So I'll open it up. I take the silence as a good thing, I hope. Maybe. So cool. Go. That's a thumbs up. Okay, that's better than that's thumbs down. Great. Yeah. So I think our task for next couple weeks, and if we can try to get this in the next couple weeks, is contact our kind of our who we're connected with, our connections, our groups, and try to find, again, the goal is at least everyone find at least one person, or at the same time, if you can confirm whether or not you are willing to go to the board meeting and kind of tell your own transit story as well. I think we can get there, especially if we jump with AAC and DC 10, see who they can bring up, because I think the idea is to get a diverse group of riders from across the transit zone. So I'll send an email kind of following up on this at the end of this. I know we got 1 minute left on that. Absent any alibis for that, I'm going to go jump over to Dina. I know I think this is something I never even considered, didn't even know this was a thing, but go ahead.
Okay, so quickly, I got an invitation to an event where a professor and UN expert named Inés Sánchez de Madariaga from Spain is going to come and talk about fair shared cities and mobility. She's amazing. She is like leading the current conversation around mobility. Anyway, so that's exciting. But then it also says Inés will be joined by Mira Mattel, performance analyst at WMATA, to discuss the gender action plan for WMATA. Now, I'm very interested in gender. I'm very interested in that, that aspect of equity, and I'd love to hear about this plan. It sounds like it's already in place because they're discussing it. Ms. Patel, I've met her at the Transportation Research Board meeting. There's a lot of things like moving and shaking there around mobility and gender, and I would love for them to present to our group because I think that's pretty critical for our work. Over.
So the question for John is something that you can kind of shed some light on, maybe get us a copy of whatever the plan is and see if somebody can speak with us so we can help maybe provide recommendations or our input based on what they say.
Yes. I will have to look at timing. I know that they are working on some stuff right now to be able to present that. So it would either be next month or in December. I would say more likely December, just in terms of time of development of materials, but I can certainly reach out to Ms. Patel to let her know that there's interest, and we can figure out a way to appropriately schedule this.
Dina,
sounds good. I mean, this meeting on this presentation on the 25th sounds like she's going to discuss it. I put the link in there. It's free at the National Building Museum. So if this is of interest to you, you can go for free. I'll be there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dina, for raising that. Thank you, John, for helping facilitate that. The very last thing I have on my list is John sent an email regarding potential new fare machines. That could be something we might want to make an informed recommendation about down the road. John, do you want to take that offline through email, or do you want to just gauge the remaining group now?
I guess, and I said this in my email, so I'll just repeat it very quickly. We are having several vendors who might be eligible to participate in, supplying us with new fare machines. They're going to be at our Eisenhower office building for 3 days the week after next. So the 15th, 16th, 17th, or I'm sorry, 16th, 17th, 18th. The machines will be available there for you to see and touch and, poke and all that stuff. As of right now, it would be during business hours, so from 9 to 5. What we don't have to do now, but I'd like to do maybe by the end of this week or the early part of next week, is if there's enough interest in and ability to get enough people together, 3 or 4 or 5 that want to come one evening, and we can identify that evening, I think we might be able to get them to extend the hours of this, until like 7. But if there's not interest, right, we don't want to have these people sit around. So we'll follow up and hopefully get get a consensus if there's a good evening for everyone, just because I do want to recognize that y'all are volunteers and you have day jobs, and it may not be convenient to visit lovely Alexandria when you're supposed to be at work.
Thanks, John. I'm going to send a follow-up post-meeting email in the next day or two, and I'll bring that up just to remind people about that. Bryna has her hand up. Bryna, I actually meant to give you a chance directly to speak after we were talking about kind of the rider engagement part, but your hand is up, so go ahead.
Thanks, and I know it's after 8, so I'll be quick. But relative to that topic, I've learned in the last month. There are several other coalitions similar to 10 that are really doing work. Smart Growth Coalition is one that comes to mind. There's a couple of others. COG, the Council on Government, has created a kind of working group with the business community and some nonprofit coalitions and local jurisdictions to do the same, have the same conversations that you guys just had about how to amplify the opportunities to educate people about the good work that Metro is doing and the financial literacy of Metro. So I say that because I know you guys were considering some outside guests, some additional outside guests. You heard from Kai and AAC came. If you're interested in some of those other coalitions, we can take that offline. So I just offered that up for your awareness. So thank you. And thanks to everyone for your great engagement tonight. Oh my gosh, what a great set of interactions and questions and ideas and thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. That's always great. Yeah, when I send my follow-up email, I'm gonna also remember to follow up on to confirm to you. Yeah, we would definitely like to have more of these organization meetings. I thought that's very productive. I think the more the merrier, especially with what we're trying to accomplish. So on that note, if anybody has anything else they want to say, I am going to, motion that we adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
Be safe, everybody.